Greetings. My name is Peter Schulte, and today I'd like to talk to you about mysterious conditions on consonant sequences created through reduplication in Roviana. Pictured as both my background and the background for this slide is the beautiful waters of the Western Solomons where Roviana can be found. So first, background on Zinama Roviana, which is how you say Roviana language in Roviana language. So Roviana is spoken by about 5,000 people in the western province of Solomon Islands. Roviana is an Austronesian language, which is remarkable for its unique form of ergativity, which contradicts theoretical predictions. Roviana also has some interesting phonological phenomena which stand to inform linguistic theory as well. Pictured is myself and my collaborator Frank Tuque, a Roviana speaker who is a speech language pathologist, also trained in linguistics. And of course, he helped me learn very much about Roviana. So let's look quickly at the Roviana phonemic inventory. Roviana has 16 phonemic consonants and 5 phonemic monophthong vowels. Diphthongs are beyond the scope of this talk, but sure to be the topic of future work. So voice stops are pre-nasalized. There is no length distinction for vowels, and sequences of identical segments are prohibited. Roviana avoids codas in surface forms. So there are 2 syllable shapes outside of unreduplicated forms. And the 2 surface shapes would be V and CV, vowel and consonant vowel. Roviana actively avoids surface codas at the end of words by inserting echo vowels. For example, as you can see in A, the underlying form you might propose is garat, which becomes garata. And an A vowel is inserted after the T. You can see that that vowel is not in the underlying form because when object agreement is encliticized, the A disappears and it becomes garatia. Compared with taka, which I do propose has an underlying final vowel, because when the object agreement is encliticized to the end, you get taka-ia. Right? The A does not disappear. Right? So the Roviana echo vowel insertion rule is summarized below. Let's talk about reduplication. So reduplication is a process whereby all or part of a word is copied and affixed to the base. There are 2 widely recognized types. The first is full reduplication, and the second is partial reduplication. To exemplify full reduplication, we'll look at Indonesian plural reduplication. Wanita, woman, becomes wanita wanita, women. We can see partial reduplication in Ugele, another language of the Western Solomons. It's fairly closely related to Roviana. For taraza, you get tataraza, completely destroy. And you can see the next example with gura works the same. Let's look at reduplication in Roviana. Now, interestingly, Roviana reduplicants have either CVC or CV in shape, but the appearance of CVC reduplicants is the only place in the language where codas occur. So for an example of CVC reduplication, we can see the root hena, to eat, becomes henhena, eating. For an example of CV reduplication, we can see lete, to plant, becomes lelete, a planter, right? Okay, a note. There is neutralization of prenasalized voice stops in coda position. So there's a general ban on prenasalized stops occurring as a coda in these CVC reduplicants. They are reduced to the nasal segment. So for example, romba, to wall, becomes rongomba, a wall, right? What about the vowel initial bases? In vowel initial roots, the first 2 segments, VC, are copied, right? So anga, to wait, becomes anganga, waiting. Pictured is Tolabai village, the village where I've done the primary amount of my fieldwork. And I have great friends there, and I'm sure they wanted to be represented in the talk. So I thought I would include a picture of their village. Let's rule out function. So why do some reduplicant serve as CVC and others as CV? Well, my first instinct was they are different functions. However, when we examine the 5 distinct functions of reduplication, there are CVC and CV examples for each function. There is no correlation between reduplicate shape and function. So here I have summarized some examples. You can see progressive is one of the functions, or continuous action with henna to henna, eat to eating. Then petu to petu, which is mangrove to a place with mangroves. Zupe to clears a bulldozer. Zupe, a pile of dirt from clearing. Tendero to glide, and tetendero to skip stones. So you can see these are different functions. The best explanation for why some reduplicants surface as CV and others surface as CVC is that there is a prohibition on certain sequences of consonants. So CVC reduplicants are syllabified with a coda, which touches an onset, right? This is the only part of the language which allows codas, and thus the only part of the language where coda-onset sequences occur. That is a sequence of coda touching an onset. Perhaps, if every logical possible sequence were tested, we could see which sequences are prohibited and which ones are permitted. Right? So here's the research design. An elicitation schedule was created to test every possible coda onset sequence to find out which ones were prohibited. Not every logical possibility can be created using natural words due to natural gaps in the paradigm. Thus, nonce words, that's words that don't exist, were created with the consultation of native speakers. The sequences were tested with native speakers in both New Zealand and Solomon Islands. Here is pictured my Roviana teacher, Glow, and of course, she was critical in this study, and I'm sure she wanted to be represented in the talk. So there's a picture of us working on this very puzzle. All right, here's the results after testing it with various speakers in New Zealand and Solomon Islands. If you look at the pattern we have displayed here on the screen, you'll see there's a few kind of generalizations, but there's not a strict generalization. There's counterexamples to a lot of them. So first of all, one thing that there's no counterexamples to, H is banned from coda position, just like English. It's not that strange. We'll just accept it. The second one is that geminates are prohibited. This keeps with Roviana's general prohibition on identical sequences. So that's not that surprising, meaning a sequence of P as a coda and P as an onset is just going to be prohibited straight out. There seems to be avoidance of homoorganic sequences, that is, sequences of consonants which have the same place of articulation. But this is not an absolute avoidance, as at least one sequence of homoorganic consonants is attested for labial, alveolar, and velar consonants. Further, there's an idiosyncratic ban on the sequence T angma, which seems unmotivated as far as I can tell. Let's discuss. So Roviana reduplication is an important data point for phonological theory. It stands to inform theory in at least 2 ways. The first is the emergence of codas in reduplicants of a language that otherwise prohibits codas in surface forms. And the second is the idiosyncratic pattern of prohibited and permissible coda-onset sequences. Against the emergence of the unmarked. So reduplicated segments typically do not display structures that are marked compared to the general phonology of the language. An observation called the emergence of the unmarked, TETU for short, T-E-T-U. Furthermore, in accordance with TETU, reduplication is often an environment which will contain structures that are less marked cross-linguistically than other environments in the same language. Roviana, a language which otherwise prohibits codas in surface forms, only allows codas in reduplicated segments, to the exact opposite we would predict based on the emergence of the unmarked. Second, natural class as an emergent phenomenon. Roviana is not unique for having a phonological process that does not neatly align with a natural class. As we noticed when we looked at the chart of permissible and prohibited sequences, no natural class can capture the pattern. Mielke, 2004, surveyed 6,077 phonologically active classes from 561 languages and attempted to classify them in one of 3 natural class systems. Of the active classes observed by Mielke, only 75.25 aligned with any of the three natural class systems. So of the three, which were the Jacobson, Font, and Halley, Chomsky and Halley, and then Clements and Hume, of these three systems, which were investigated by Mielke, even the best one only accounted for 3/4 of the known phonological processes. Thus, it might be argued, natural class itself is an emergent phenomenon, not an underlying principle which triggers phonological processes. So in conclusion, Roviana reduplication stands to inform phonological theory and highlights the importance of studying little described languages. Important. The world's linguistic diversity is in crisis as the majority of languages are currently losing speakers. These languages are important to both human heritage and language science. The only time to study them is now. And I think this study of Roviana really drives this home. It does somewhat confirm Mielke's work, right? But we want to explore as many languages as possible for the sake, at least, of language science. Leana hola. So that means thank you in Roviana, and thank you for listening. And this is a picture of Nusa Hope in Roviana Lagoon. You can see above water and below water. I would like to specifically thank the Roviana community for their support in this puzzle, with special attention to Frank Touquet and Glo Oxenham and the rest of the Touquet family who helped me quite a bit for this. Thank you very much.